The people that think they need 12 months of serious training to sign up for a marathon, and although in my social media, because everybody knows me at this time, I don't get very much of that. Oh, you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, clearly 95% of people that wouldn't know me would be like, oh, you definitely should not be doing that.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me.
But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick, aka Warwick Runs on different platforms. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. As you can hear, I have a pretty bad cold. I don't know if it's super bad, but it's definitely a cold and my voice is just about gone. So the intro is not going to be very long. I appreciate everyone listening. And if you haven't already, please give this podcast a review and share it with a friend. Keep tagging the Marathon Podcast or Warwick Runs on Instagram when listening to the pod. Really appreciate that. And also want to congratulate all of the Boston Marathon qualifiers this year, the ones that got in, because that was announced a couple of days ago. It's pretty hard to get in these days when you have to do a 250 marathon or faster, 250 26, I guess, for my age group. It says everything about the level of marathon running today, and also says something about how prestigious of a marathon the Boston Marathon is. In today's episode, we're having Frank on. He's a very impressive runner, but he's a lot more. I think we're going to let Frank introduce himself, especially because I'm running out of voice here. So without wasting any more time, we're just going to jump to the conversation with Frank.
Frank, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. 150 marathons under your belt.
151, but who's counting, right? I've done one since you reached out.
151. Oh yeah, I did not get that, but oh wow, that's insane. Because Sydney was your 150th, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I did one the next weekend when I got back home.
Oh wow. We have to before you present yourself. I'm curious to hear what was the first marathon that you ever did.
The first marathon was the Marine Corps marathon here where I live in Washington, D.C. 1997, I think it was.
Wow. Was that like something that you planned to do for a long time, or was it kind of an impulsive?
No, it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. Back then, marathoning wasn't as popular as it is now. So you don't have to sign up, months and months in advance. It was still open. And my entire running started once I signed up for the Marine Corps. I signed up like maybe 2.5 months before it started. My aunt actually was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. And so I was just on the spur of the moment trying to think of something really difficult to do to sort of motivate her to fight her cancer, and decided to sign up for the Marine Corps as a total non-runner. And so that's how my whole running began right then.
Wow. And here we are, almost 30 years later,
Yep.
and you've done a lot of them. Before we dive into all the marathons, all the running, who are you? Who is Frank?
My name is Frank Fumich. I'll be 58 years old in November, so coming up. Born and raised in Northern Virginia, Arlington, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. I'm primarily a husband and a father. I'm a business owner, and I'm a runner, and also really an endurance athlete. Somewhere along the line, I wanted to test my limits, and not just running, but every basis of endurance racing and adventures. And so, yeah, for almost 30 years now, I've been pursuing running and all kinds of those things.
So what kind of other endurance sports have you been up to?
Well, I do triathlons. I've done Ironmans. I've done in the world. There is a world of ultra Ironmans that most people don't even know existed. So I've done like a triple, a quintuple, and a 10 times Ironman, where you do 10 times the swim, 10 times the run, or 10 times the bike, 10 times the run. I got into stand-up paddling, which culminated in the Molokai to Oahu paddle is like the Super Bowl of stand-up paddling. I did Race Across America, which is probably the toughest cycling race on the planet, from Oceanside, California, all the way to the East Coast, 3,000 miles in 12 days. And then I got into mountain climbing. And currently I have summited 6 out of the 7 summits. And I'm signed up to climb Mount Everest to complete that in this coming May.
Wow.
And I've skied to both poles. So there's something called the Explorers Grand Slam. All 7 summits, both poles. So all I have is Everest left. I've done like self-supported ultra marathons, through all the deserts, and 100 milers, 350-mile self-supported, and frozen can't. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of. I can't even. I'd have to look to. I'm getting tired
Wow.
just recalling it all. But yeah, a lot of stuff.
That is insane. Well, I think a lot of people listening to this, or I guess also a lot of people you talk to, if you tell them about this, they will just ask you if you really like to suffer or if you enjoy pain a lot. You did mention that when you did your first marathon, that was kind of just to sign up for to support your aunt and to show or give her some strength.
Right.
Where do you think that I guess like that strength, but also that need to challenge yourself in those very extreme ways, where does that come from?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't even know that was in me until I experienced that first marathon. That was my first race of any kind. So, I mean, I guess I was a competitive person, but as far as pushing my limits, I had never done anything like that. And it wasn't really, I mean, as soon as I crossed the finish line, I was like, I'm never doing that again, which is what most first time marathoners say. And of course, once the pain subsides and you only remember the good stuff. But I was fascinated with because I was in so much pain. I'd only been running for 2.5 months, and every cell in my body wanted to stop running, and yet my mind kept myself going. And so I became intrigued with, wow, like, it's incredible. The brain is so powerful to just make your body continue to go when you want to give up. And so yeah, I just wanted to kind of, it awakened something in me, and I was wondering, what am I made of? I mean, there's other things besides a marathon, even like, can I go even further, or how many can I do? And so then it just kind of grew into sort of a quest to see where my limits are and see what I am personally capable of, kind of thing.
Did you feel like you found that, or are you still searching for that? Have you found a challenge that kind of just tests you so much that it's hard to even go through with it?
Yeah, I mean, I find my limits all the time, really, because it's not just in distance, it's really how fast you can push yourself. You can find your limits in a 10K if you go fast enough. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've definitely gone. I've found some limits, but you run one crazy race and you learn of 2 more. I mean, I at almost 58, I pretty much know where my limits are, but there's still some particular things that I'd like to see if I can do. Like, for instance, Mount Everest. At this age, can I do it? And so, um, yeah, I mean, you're always and your limits are decreasing as you get older. So what was your limit 10 years ago is probably past your limit now. But it's nice to know that at some point in the prime of my physical life, I was able to do some of the things that I didn't know I could do before I did them.
And you strike me as a pretty ambitious guy in a lot of ways, like as a business owner, but also with all these adventures or things that you're doing. After that first marathon, and like you said, all of us we've had the same thought, like, I'm never doing this again. Kind of like drinking, I guess, where people wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm never drinking again, and then
Yeah.
come Friday they're out again. But uh did you did you set yourself a goal of doing a certain amount of marathons, anything like that, or has that just been a consequence of all the things you've been doing?
Yeah, no, I never set a goal, and I still don't have one. Um, I think when I first did the first marathon, I might have done another one before I immediately signed up for an Ironman, which is my first ever triathlon. But
Mhm.
marathoning is like something that's not so crazy that, was always my fallback to when I got into this life and I was training for other things. A marathon was a great way to train for longer races. It's much easier to run a marathon where there's people around and excitement and adrenaline, as opposed to just going on a training run by myself for 4 or
Yeah.
5 hours. So at some point, when I realized that I was going to keep doing this, marathoning was a great way to, to train. It was also a great way to just keep in shape to a certain degree. If I wasn't in some kind of crazy training, I always felt that if I could just keep marathoning, I would stay in good shape. I don't think, um, I never even paid attention to how many I had done until it dawned on me about the 50 states. I think someone said, "Wow, how many states do you have?" And I was like, "Wow, I have no idea." And so I finally sat down and checked them all off. And when they asked me, I was over halfway done. And so then I thought, "Wow, that'd be a good goal." And so then the actual 50 states became a goal. And then I somehow stumbled onto my total because I had no idea how many I'd done. So once I was close to 100, then I started paying attention, and then now I know where I am. Usually I share it on social media, and so I share the number, and that's the only way I can
Mhm.
remember. I go back to like the last marathon, and I see, okay, I was 148, so this one's 149, and that's kind of how I keep track.
I love your approach though, in terms of like what you were saying, that running a marathon with a crowd is much more fun than going out there by yourself. So it seems like a lot of your marathons might have been just another training run or a very long run, I guess. But did you also have time goals or marathons that you were kind of going more all in with, or what has that been like?
Yeah. So in my head, I always like I rarely am able to just run a casual marathon, even if my intention is to do that. If if a certain pace, as soon as the gun goes off or cannon or the start whistle, something clicks in my brain and all my plans go out the window, and I try to push as hard as I can for that specific shape I'm in, or even harder. I'm always making myself utterly miserable in a marathon for just some arbitrary number that pops in my head. I mean, historically, I'd like to always, because I'm not a fast runner, I'm totally average, but I'm not really slow either. So I always like to stay under 4 hours. And so even now, it's getting a little bit harder to do. Although I did do that in Sydney just by
I saw.
purely by pushing it like crazy. But I was expecting like a 4.5 hour marathon. And so anyway, no, I don't really. I only train. I did qualify for Boston one time, and that's the only time I've ever trained for speed. And it was the year after the Boston bombings. Um, I ended up just deciding to raise money for some of the victims, and so I ended up running from DC to Boston and I raised like
Wow.
80 some thousand for the victims. And so I
Jeez.
thought it would be super special to run it that next year. And so I did train for speed and I was able to qualify. Um, so that was like the only time that I had an important training time goal. But otherwise, I just like to do as best as I can or better than I should be doing.
And with all those marathons under your belt and all the Ironmans and everything that you've done, a lot of people and people much younger than you are today, but in general, people tend to struggle with injuries and, obstacles that keep them from being that active over such a long time. How has that been for you? Because it seems like you've been super active. Have you been able to do this consistently over the years, or did you have to take breaks because of your body stopping you or saying no at some point?
I mean, I had a few injuries, but I mean, predominantly I've been pretty lucky. I mean, it's probably mostly genetics because I've never stretched and I really don't follow any of the normal things that I've never used a foam roller. I've never done anything that you really should be doing. So it's probably just luck and genetics. I have pulled a couple hamstrings, and I think I had a stress fracture 2 years ago from just overtraining. But yeah, probably just lucky. But even during the Berlin Marathon, I I pulled my hamstring 4 miles into it and had to walk 22 miles just to eke in under the 6.5 hour cutoff time. Um, so a lot of times I probably am lucky because I don't really listen to what my body's saying. But yeah, maybe genetics has enabled me to keep going this long.
What about strength training? Is that something that you've focused on and done a
Yeah,
lot
I
of?
do, but mostly just because of vanity. I did not really. because I want to look. I never wanted to look like a skinny runner, and I always lifted weights before I began running. So I just like to have a little bit more muscle on my. It probably actually does it help my running. I mean, I'm not really muscle bound now in the last couple of years because the older I get, it's too much work to train and
Hmm.
lift. Where I used to do that when I was younger. So, um, in the past, it's probably hurt my running. But yeah, it helped to some degree. I do strength training.
Yeah. And you mentioned Boston and 50 states, and I know that you've done all 7 majors. Now that Sydney became one, you got that one too. What has been your favorite marathon?
Well, probably. I mean, I'm not sure about the favorite specific because I've like Marine Corps marathon because it's my hometown marathon and it's my first marathon. It's very special. And my dad was a World War II veteran, and he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery, which is the most famous cemetery in the well, maybe in the world, but certainly in the U.S. Both of my parents are buried there. When you walk to the start line each year, I pass the cemetery, so it's kind of a special moment for me. And I think I've done it maybe 16 times. So that's probably my favorite marathon. It probably wouldn't be if it didn't mean so much to me, but I would say that's my favorite marathon.
Yeah. What about when it comes to the majors? Now that you've done all of them, which one do you feel like stand out for you? And obviously, there are different things you could look at. And I'm not necessarily talking about the course itself, but more the energy, the vibe when you got home, like the feeling you were left with. Which one
Yeah,
left
I
you?
mean, I would say Boston just because it seems the atmosphere there is incredible. And Boston Marathon is just seems like the marathon you want to run one time if you had to pick
Hmm.
one in your life. And I've done it a few times now. Um, I will say that Chicago, because when I did Chicago, it was right after COVID just opened, and it was after how long of like no marathons or like nobody at a marathon, and we were all wondering like, God, is life ever going to get back to normal? And that was the first one where everybody was back out, and so running that was like incredible because tons of people came out, and everybody was feeling like, wow, we finally made it back. So that particular experience might have been my favorite of all of them, but doing Boston's probably I would say is still probably my favorite. If I had to
Yeah.
pick one that anyone would want to do, I'd say Boston.
Yeah, I've only done Boston of the majors, and it was really really special. My fiance is also from there, so it
Oh
made it
wow.
more
Oh
special. But I can't imagine doing the Boston Marathon the year after the bombing. Can you say something about that? Because that I'm tearing up here just thinking about that, and like
yeah.
what a special race that must have been, and how important it was for obviously for all the runners in Boston, for the victims, for all runners maybe in the whole world.
Yeah, I got chills actually when you were just mentioning that. Yeah, that was incredibly special and so patriotic for us Americans. And yeah, I can't even describe it. It was just like, the adrenaline was surging through me unbelievably during the marathon and the patriotism and just the spirit there to know we were back and we weren't going to let, terrorists or anybody else ruin our way of life. And yeah, it was an incredible feeling to be back there. It was really special. And then, of course, because I ran from DC to Boston and raised the money, I ran through also with the charity of one of the victims' dads that started it. So I was wearing their shirt, and I had an American flag with me, and it was amazing. Yeah.
What was that boy with that number?
Yes.
His favorite
8.
number 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was amazing, and even so I also initially raised money. My gosh, my mind's gone totally blank because I just ran right before we were on camera here. But the gentleman that had his legs blown off, his when he was running or his girlfriend was running, his fiance at the time, and he was waiting for her when the bomb went off. And so, thousands of people, Jeff Bowman, weren't allowed to finish, and his fiance was one of them. And I think they stopped her with maybe 10 miles to go. So after when I ran and I ran with a friend of mine too, from DC to Boston. Once we got there, we ended at the start of the marathon, and then we ran the whole marathon course. And so we had like dozens of people show up, and the news was there. And I had reached out to his fiance through another, I can't even remember how I actually contacted them. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to be giving you, I ended up giving him 26,200 miles, for the 26.2, or
Yeah.
I gave him $26,200. And somehow I got a hold of his family, who got a hold of his fiance, and we said, yeah, because you got stopped 10 miles from the finish, it would be great if you could meet us and run the last 10 miles. And she showed up with 10 miles to go, and we all ran together. And then, even though they didn't finish, they gave all those people medals anyway. She actually gave me her Boston Marathon medal, and signed it. "Thanks for all you did for Jeff," and signed her name. And so, all this was in my head when I was running it for the first time the next year. So it was like special on so many fronts. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even start to imagine, because I talked to a lot of people in Boston and myself too, like this year, and obviously every year with Boston Marathon I would say is special, but that year even more so in so many ways. And we are crying crossing the finish line this year in 2025. How was that for you? It must have been super emotional throughout the whole race, maybe.
Oh, you mean that first year? Oh, it was incredibly
Yeah.
emotional. Yeah, I definitely shed some tears. Um, I mean, just the whole route was just packed with people and American flags. And I mean, what my country's going through now is just such division. And I almost miss, back to a time when we had a national tragedy, because that's when my country really comes together. And it was such a special time where everybody was on the same side. It was just us against them, as opposed to us against us, kind of the feeling in politics here now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just it was incredible experience.
Yeah, and talking about that, and how how I feel like also in a lot of ways running and marathons, they unite us in a lot of ways. That's one thing that I really appreciated about Boston. We were all standing there, we were all having not necessarily the same specific goal, but we all wanted to get to that finish line. We've been working towards that, and that was one thing that we really had in common. And uh, or for me at least, that is like what we had in common, is running and running towards this goal. And for you, who's been running and competing and doing all of these things throughout so many years, uh, how would you say that running or sports in general has shaped you as a person?
Well, I've made a lot of friends and a lot of attachments through running. And you're right. Running is just, and my wife is a non-runner, and I meet people running all the time. And, I like, for Marine Corps every year, I invite like anybody who wants to run to come to my house. And she's like, "Well, you just met them. How do you know?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I ran with them for 3.5 hours. So like, I feel like we're best friends now." Yeah, running definitely brings people together, and made really lifelong relationships from running. And even when I ran the DC to Boston, we had people that saw it on the news or on the internet, and came out in the middle of the night, like 2 in the morning, in some random state on the East Coast, and ran with us. And I have stayed friends with them ever since. I mean, how many years has it even been, the bombings? But, and I don't know, it just seems like that doesn't happen in every sport. I mean, sure, you're on a team together, but like a marathon, you're basically meeting 30,000 strangers potentially, but you can bond with them so quickly because you're all in the same, you're battling the same thing. Very rarely, unless you're a professional, are you running against anyone. In my experience, I feel like I'm running with 30,000 runners. I'm not competing against them. So you feel like you're all on the same team. It's one of the few things you can do now where no one's arguing about politics when you're running a marathon. You're just, and you don't even have to talk to the guy next to you or the woman next to you, because it's just the shared experience of, what they're going through. They know what you're going through. You're both trying, like you said, your goal is to get to the finish line. And so you don't even have to talk really to feel kind of a bond and a comradeship in that, which is really special.
Exactly, and I think what you're saying there, the running community is very unique. I come from speed skating myself, so I was doing that full time for many years, and I do have a lot of friends from there that I would consider my best friends. But there is still something very different about a competitive environment like that, where you are, all of us, we were trying to get to the Olympics and trying to be the best in the world. And I feel like with that uh, competitiveness that we had there, that kind of still created something between us, right? Like something that I don't really feel is the case with running, at least not at my level. That when, like you said, when you go to Boston or when you go to a marathon, you are all there together, and you're not necessarily competitors, although you might be. But it's so, like, obviously I think most of us, we want to beat our friends, right? Like
Sure.
if you have your friend next to you, you want to beat him or her. But I still really appreciate that part of running, and I've experienced the same as you said about making friends through this podcast. For instance, I've talked to a lot of very fast runners in the States, and some runners who are not that fast, but all of them I'm really connecting with, and I wouldn't feel too weird about going out having a dinner together. And I think that is something that you don't really see in a lot of other, I don't know, communities.
Yeah,
Not
no,
in the same way.
I totally agree. Yeah, very well
Yeah.
said.
So 151 marathons. I'm still, very impressed with that. And obviously, this being the
Thank you.
marathon podcast, I want to talk a little bit more about that, because 150 marathons since 1996. How did that like pan out? Was it have you been doing them regularly, or have you had some years where you've done a lot and then you had some years off? How has that been?
Well, it started off pretty slow because, again, I didn't really know it was going to develop to this point, and at some point, it became like a great training tool. So, um, yeah, in the beginning, I'd have to like look at my. There's a website that keeps all my races. I'd have to look and see, but it kind of ramped up somewhat slowly. But in the last, well, I tell you what, so Marine Corps was my 100th marathon, or it was my first marathon and my 100th, and the 100th was like 3 years ago. So
Oh
I've done
wow.
50 in like 3 years versus it took me 25 years. So it's really ramped up, where now I do a dozen or so a year. And last year I did, I don't know if you're familiar with the 7 marathons on 7 continents, and so I did that in October
Oh, you did
or
with
November.
Wyatt Moss.
What's that?
With Wyatt Moss, the guy who did 50 marathons in 50 states last year, and then he did that one, or maybe he did it the year
No,
after
well,
you. Then maybe it was this
there's
spring.
two companies now. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't think I did it with him.
No.
Um, anyway, so that was like
Yeah.
7 in 1 week, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but yeah, now it's like ramped. It's probably a dozen. I mean, I don't really run them in the summer because my kids are out of school, and we take vacations, and I don't want to be like a crazy dad that just runs all the time. But it's easier when they're in school. And fall and spring here and near Washington DC, there's so many. So if I'm trying to stay in shape or really looking to ramp it up, I can find one all the time. So matter of fact, I was just scrolling online this morning trying to see, and so there's a couple coming up in the next month that I'm signed up for Marine Corps Marathon again. So I'd have to see how many I've done, but this year will probably be about probably around a dozen again this year, I think. But I don't have
Wow.
any numbers I'm going for. I just want to keep running until I can. Sometimes when I'm running a marathon, I see like the old man that's like kinked over sideways and he's got his knees taped up. I love seeing that. I'm like, that's definitely going to be me one of these days. When you look at the guy and like, he should definitely stop running, but then I'm impressed, and I'll be that guy that probably should have stopped but didn't.
I love that. I think it's great, but I also, it also makes me think about, how, and I think this is an interesting part of the community we were talking about, because obviously having such a good and engaged community, you also have a lot of opinions on how to do things, how many marathons to run every year. And I did a marathon a week and a half ago, and on my Strava, when I started posting my runs again, someone asked me like, "Are you sure you're up to, like, should you be running yet? You need to make sure you recover." And I totally support that, because I think that obviously we all recover differently, and some people need to recover more. But you doing then, like you said, 12 a year, or I guess sometimes even more. What is your take on that, and how is your approach to that? Because Sydney is like what, 2.5 weeks ago, and you've only already done
Yeah,
another one after that.
right.
So
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I'm not suggesting anyone follow my my thinking, but like on I think we connected on I must have shared my picture on the one Facebook page,
yes,
and
exactly.
it's on pages like that where you have all kinds of different levels of runners that I see the difference in thinking that span, the people that think they need 12 months of serious training to sign up for a marathon. And although in my social media, because everybody knows me at this time, I don't get very much of that. Oh, you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, clearly 95% of people that wouldn't know me would be like, oh, you definitely should not be doing that. Um, but I mean, barring a physical limitation of some sort, most people have it in them to literally walk out your door and probably cover 3 marathons, stumbling and walking. Physically, you're able to do it. It's just mostly a mindset. And, as long as you don't blow it out and run too fast and, risk pulling a muscle or something like that, most people vastly overestimate the amount of time and training. I mean, sure, the less you train, the more it's going to hurt, obviously. But people are capable of doing so much more than they realize. It's unbelievable. When I see comments like, oh, I don't have 10 months to train. I so badly want to chime in and say, look, trust me, you do not need, but then you start a whole thing online with people that probably know more than I do, but a lot of it's in your head. And if you believe you can do it and you're reason, you don't have any physical limitations, people can do way more than they think they're capable of doing.
And it sounds like you're a proof of that. And you did mention that, like in Sydney, that you were really fighting to get that sub 4 marathon. You did 3:55, right?
Yeah. 3:55, 6 or 4, something like that.
Yeah. But you also did mention that some of the marathons you've signed up for, you haven't necessarily had the plan of racing, but then the gun goes off and then you get competitive.
Yes.
So say, for instance, the marathon that you did a week or a week and a half after Sydney, were you super competitive and tried to go all out for that one, or was that more like a long run?
Yeah, that was more like a long run because it's tough to I've done it so many times. It's tough to just pass up a local one like that. And um since I am just beginning my Everest training officially, I kind of wanted to just kickstart things and, put myself in a little bit of pain. But I was really physically hurting from Sydney because I went way faster there than I planned. And my local one, the humidity was crazy, and they ended up stopping the race early, and 4 people had to go to the hospital. So because of heat exhaustion or whatever. So the temperature was way different, and but I did in this one say I'm not gonna even attempt to go under 4, and I went. I think I was 4:16, which is still decent considering
Mhm.
it was way hotter and it was only a week after the other one. But I was able to turn my brain off in that one. But even sometimes if I want to break 4 and then I'm somehow finding I'm at like 3:51 pace, then I'll start thinking, whoa, if I keep this up, I can get, 3:49 sounds so much better than, but it's just to me. I mean, I know nobody I know cares one way or the other whether I run a
Mhm.
3:30 or 6:30. But to me, in my brain, it just matters. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a very nice realization that I had during my last marathon, because I feel like, and especially I think my generation, I'm 32, so I didn't really grow up with social media, but I'm still a big part of that generation where it's been there for a long time, and I'm posting. I'm a filmmaker of profession, so I've made these documentaries on my running journey.
Oh,
My
cool.
fiance told me that I had to do that when I started training for Boston, and so I started doing that, and I do still feel like it's a bit narcissistic, and sometimes those thoughts I will start thinking about, okay, so during my marathon, if I don't make my goal, I kind of been vocal about it, I put it out there, but then at the last 6 miles of my marathon, I was hurting so bad, and then I realized that the thought that motivated me the most was that I wanted to be happy at the end of the day. Like I wanted to be happy with the result,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed that thought. Kind of like back to what you were saying, that no one really cares if you do whatever time you're doing. But for me, I wanted to do a certain time, and I wanted to be happy, and I knew that if I wasn't happy with my time, I would not be happy the rest of the day, and maybe not even the rest of the week, because this is
Right.
something that I was really training for.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to feel, or have that thought of, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this because it's my goal. It's
Yeah.
something that I really want to. I'm not doing this to have people telling me that it's good or not. Obviously, it's fun to hear that after too,
Yeah.
but that's not my motivation, and that's not a nice part of it too.
Yeah, yeah, it's all for me self-motivation. I mean, accountability in some respects via social media can be a good thing. If you put something out there. I mean, I recently did a 3-day water only fast maybe a month ago. And, food willpower, because I'm in pretty good shape and I really, it wasn't necessary, but I just kind of wanted to see if I had the willpower to do it. And I was afraid if I just kept it, I knew I wouldn't follow through because after a day I'd be like, what the hell with this. But I did put it out there, and I knew once I put it out there that I would definitely follow through because I didn't want to say publicly that I bailed. So in some
Mhm.
ways, it can be helpful, but I don't keep running faster than I plan because I'm afraid to post it on social media because again, nobody cares. But yeah, the
Exactly.
feeling of satisfaction, when I'm doing that to myself, I'm thinking, okay, like this pain is only going to last for, I only have to keep it going for another hour and 10 minutes kind of thing. And like, I'm not going to fall over dead. I'm just going to be incredibly miserable and in pain, but it's going to end in an hour. And then I'm going to be able to look back and be so satisfied, just have that self satisfaction that I gave everything I had. And in the case of Sydney, I really, really had no intention of doing the sub 4, and I met a friend of mine there who was training for, Melbourne, just
Hmm.
coming up, and he was he's way younger, and he's much better shape, so he said, "I'll run with you," and I'm like, "Okay," but I mean, I'm gonna be like 4.5, and we actually started running a little faster, and at the halfway point, I was at 2:02, so I was basically on pace for like a 4:04, but I was already tired. And then that's when it like kicked in. I'm like, oh God. I was almost like it was like this other person popped into my head. I'm like, oh no, like don't even start. Like I was talking to my alter ego. And then sure enough, um, it happened. And actually, Sydney was so huge, there was different pace groups. So
Hmm.
and we started further up than we should have. So even like the like 4-hour group would have passed us eventually, probably. But anyway, so 2 340 groups passed us, and the third 340 pace group reached us with 8 miles to go. And so I said, you know what, let's just, and he was totally running my pace. He's like, don't, I'm like, let's just see if, let me see if I can hang on to them for like 10 minutes, just to bank a few minutes. And then the 10 minutes, then I start thinking, God, just then, only just 50 more minutes, 40 more minutes. And then I ended up, one thing led to another. But as I look back on my times, other than Berlin, when I pulled my hamstring, all my other majors were sub 4. So this would have been the only one healthy that I would have done over 4. And and I didn't even think about it. And I was so happy with myself that I pushed it. So now I can say that barring injury, I have run, the other 6 in under 4 hours, which makes me happy.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And now that you mentioned Sydney, Sydney is kind of my next big goal. Or I have a couple of marathons before that, but I'm really hoping to get a spot there next year. And I'm curious about what that was. That your first time doing Sydney?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was that like? The whole event and the marathon of Sydney?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, Sydney's so beautiful. I love Sydney, and I've been there a few times before, but never run there. But yeah, the city is so pretty, and like the Aussies. I mean, I literally have never met an Aussie that I didn't love. They're like the most
Yeah.
positive, friendly people ever. And so yeah, it was a great race. It was pretty well organized. I ended up showing up so late. I arrived the day before. So the expo, everyone had pretty much gone to the expo. I guess there was some hiccups. It was just the volume of people overwhelmed them the first couple of days. But I was in and out of the expo super fast. And um, yeah, it was a great experience. I got in through a marathon travel company. And
Yeah.
so, I just followed everybody to the metro, and it was an easy metro ride, and it finished right near our hotel. So yeah, it was and the weather was absolutely perfect. It was a little chilly in the morning, but 40s Fahrenheit, but warmed up to like the 60s or 70s and sun. And yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, I had one of the marketing managers of or social media marketing managers on before Sydney, and he was obviously very excited and nervous about the whole event. And
I bet.
he was talking about how they've been doing a lot of work to try to get all the people of Sydney out there to cheer for the runners and show up for Sydney and for the runners. What was your experience with the spectators and the Aussies showing up for you guys on that day?
Yeah, it was super crowded. The turnout was amazing. Um, Yeah, there were people everywhere. There was even one section where some of the local, there was a really long out and back section, and the out and back and loops, because I've done all kinds of crazy, miserable loops, and that doesn't bother me at all. Um, and it was that section was flat because I didn't even look at the course profile, which is typical of me, and I didn't know it was hilly until I was like running up my third hill, and I'm like, whoa, this is actually hilly. So that particular portion of out and back was flat. So I was enjoying it because it was flat. And even out there was tons of people on both sides of the road and people cheering. Yeah, the turnout was amazing. Really good vibe and big energy.
So you recommend it
Oh,
for
definitely.
other runners?
Yeah, for sure. Especially now that it's a major. I mean, you know, yeah, it's definitely got to be on your list.
Yeah, I'm curious about the numbers for next year because I think they had like 70 or between 70 and 80,000 people applying this year.
Wow.
But I think next year is probably
Oh,
gonna
be
be even more
crazy.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's I think that maybe actually on the day that this episode comes out, that's when they open the ballot for Sydney
Oh, no
2026. So
kidding.
yeah,
So what date is that? I don't even know.
I th- I think it's 1 week from now
Oh,
from
okay. No
today.
kidding.
So that is where today is 17th. So yeah, 24th.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you more about your training, but before I do, looking at your social media and also in your introduction here, like you said, you seem to be a family man first, and that's your priority. But all of these like adventures of yours and training, it takes a lot of time. And how you've been able to combine that with, yeah, with work, but also prioritizing family.
Well, I own my own business, which I mean, there's pluses and minuses that I have a lot of responsibility, but I don't necessarily have to be in my office, 9 to 5 or whatever. So that makes it a little bit easier because I do lots of my training when my kids are in school, so I don't take away from family time. And like I said, in the summertime, I really try not to do anything, so I don't take away from that. But yeah, I mean, there's only a certain amount of hours in a day, and inevitably you have to give up something if you want to achieve your goals. So, some people it's sleep. Some people, for me, it's mostly giving up a lot of the fun things that just recreational that I would like to be doing. I mean, I had to give up, years of playing golf, for instance, with all my friends that love to play golf because I didn't have 4 hours, 5 hours on a golf course when I could be training. That's one of the things. So, um, you have to sacrifice something. In my case, it certainly can't be my family. So for me personally, yeah, it's given up all the recreational fun stuff, the partying. I mean, I wouldn't be out partying at 58 now, but still like happy hours with friends. I don't really do that because, I know I've got to, because it's too hard to run 10 miles with a hangover at 58 now. So, but yeah, that's one of the priorities that I won't step over is the family time.
Yeah, and I really respect that. And what I've seen talking to a lot of runners, all levels really, is that the ones that probably enjoy running the most and the ones that are uh, performing the best, they usually have a pretty supportive family and especially partner at home. How important has that been for you? Although you said your wife was a non-runner, right? But
Yeah, she's a non-runner.
I
Yeah,
yeah.
no, she is of course supportive. We like to call it grudgingly accepting over here in my house. I mean, she's not thrilled about it, but I mean, certainly I can't sign up for things that are big without saying, "Hey, can I mean, although I have in the past and I've gotten a little in trouble for it, I try to get permission before I sign up for something. But yeah, you couldn't possibly do this type of stuff the level I do if you didn't have a partner that is okay with it. I mean, that just wouldn't work. So, but for people that have, 9 to 5 jobs and work a ton at the office, it would be much more difficult for those people. I feel for, but I mean, you just have to get up at 4 in the morning and basically
Mhm.
sacrifice your sleep in order to get training in for those folks. So that's got to be tough. But I'm pretty fortunate in that. But I mean, there were years when I worked, 18 hours a day, and forget about 8. Um, and somehow I managed to. I don't even know how I got it in then, but yeah, it's all about juggling and balancing, and it's pretty exhausting, but also rewarding.
Yeah. Do you know who Jess McLean is? The American marathon runner. I think she placed eighth in the Tokyo Marathon this like
Yeah,
on
I'm
Saturday.
not so big on all the pro runners, but yeah, I'm certainly
Yeah,
somewhat
but
familiar.
yeah. So she's obviously a very good runner. She was the best American in Boston this year. And I had her on, and we were talking about these things. She actually gets up at 4:30. One because she lives in Phoenix and it's super hot, so
Right.
she needs to get up early to not for
Yeah.
it not to get hot. But she also kind of she gave up on a corporate job and started working a nonprofit. So she works nonprofit full time, and she's a professional runner, a Brooks sponsored runner. And when I asked her, I think I asked her about the secret, something amongst those lines, and she's just said, "Choose your partner wisely." That's the one thing
Right.
that's the one thing you can actually you are. What did you say? That's the one thing you're allowed to be picky on. She said.
Right. I like
I
that.
thought that was great.
Yeah, you certainly couldn't. It'd be tough to meet someone and then pick this as your hobby. My excuse
Yeah.
is I was doing this long before. I mean, I got married late in life and didn't get married till I was 38 or 39. So I had been doing it for 8 or so years. I mean, things have gotten only a little bit crazier, but she sort of knew what she was getting into, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Plays a little bit here.
But I'm curious then, like in terms of obviously how much time you spend on this and how much time you spend on this, but also in terms of your training, what does your training normally looks like? And I understand that it probably looks very different when you start preparing for something like Mount Everest compared to
Yeah.
running the marathons.
Right.
But in general, what does it look like?
Well, at this point, I've been going so long, and again, it's kind of mind over matter for me. I always keep a good base. Like running is one of the things that I keep doing, even if I'm not specifically training for anything. But my general run is like a 10-minute mile pace, 1 hour run, so like 6 miles, and I'll do that maybe about 4+ times a week as like a general base. Um, and at this point, if that's all I did, I could show up at a marathon once a month or even once every few months and muscle through a marathon. Now, if I'm doing that and I know I have a marathon coming up, maybe I'll do a couple 10-milers, but it's nothing like, it was when I was first starting out and like specifically marathon training, where I'd get like a 22 or 3+ miler in ahead of time. I actually did an Ironman in July in Spain, and I'm not sh I did very l I hadn't swum this is totally crazy, but I hadn't swam in 8 years. Not once when I got into this when I started the Ironman. In the actual swim portion, I had not swam in 8 years. Cycling, I think I did maybe, I did it like a 40 miler or a 50 miler I did do a 100 miler on my trainer in my basement, 100 miler. But running, um, I'm not sure if I ran more than 10 milers. I did maybe a handful of them before the Ironman, but so I knew I had that fitness. And between that and Sydney, which was exactly a month, um, I don't think I ran anything longer than six milers, but I just did a bunch of them just to kind of keep fit. So yeah, now my training is totally stupid, and nobody should do that. But um, yeah, when I'm do something really serious, or if I wanted a time goal, if I ever like wanted to qualify for Boss again, I would totally be legit, run the correct amount, pace, all that type of stuff. But yeah, at this point, I can pretty much just keep a base and just show up and mentally muscle through anything.
What about your philosophy when it comes to training and like, yeah, if we talk marathon training, because that's what the podcast is about. But it, today we're talking a lot about easy runs and keeping the low intensity and threshold and all of that. What has your approach been like?
That's so funny you mentioned that, because just now I do have a trainer from my climb, and I've never trained via heart rate, never had a heart rate monitor, and I
Okay.
just started like a week ago. And I'm realizing that I think I literally just had this conversation coincidentally a couple days ago with a friend, that I think I've been running too hard, like pushing it way beyond what was actually good for me, because mostly, I've got a number in my head like 6 miler, and I'm running, and I'm like, well, I don't want to take a whole hour, so then I just speed up just to get it done. And I think I've been running way over my heart rate. I don't even know what that's done to me, but um yeah, so I mean, for me mostly it was mental. Like if I don't want to go for a run, I will go for a run just because mentally it's a test. Or I also never, 99% of the time, I don't run with other people. I just do it by myself because it's so boring and it's not fun. And if you can get good at running by yourself and pushing yourself when you're totally alone and no one knows about it, then when you show up at a race and there's thousands of people and the adrenaline's, it'll make it so much easier. So that's one thing I do is I just try to make myself as miserable as I can in training, so that on race day, I always say, the more steps you take in training, the easier or the harder a step is in training, the easier the step will be in a marathon. And so that's kind of my philosophy, more mental than, heart rate or pace or any of that stuff. That
Huh.
makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I also think it's interesting what you were saying about uh, the intensity that you've done a lot of throughout your life. And I I always thought it was funny, especially coming from, Norway. We're known for the Norwegian method, and some of the triathletes, like a clean sweep this weekend in the World
Oh
Championships in the
wow!
Ironman. Yeah, so it's like,
Congrats, that's impressive.
yeah, that was good. And they've been focusing on, the low intensity and the threshold. So like the harder workouts, they're not really hard. They're
Yes.
harder than low intensity,
Who
but still
knew?
not that hard. Exactly. And I always thought it was funny that, especially when you watch American movies, you see these athletes and they're pushing themselves so hard the day before a competition
Right.
just to get good at the day of the
Yeah,
competition.
that's right.
And I think that if you have experience with sports, you know that that's not how it goes. But I also understand how people who find sports later in life, they just watch these movies and they
Right.
might think that that's what it's like.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of people also might think that you need to have that taste of iron in your mouth
Right.
to even improve or to run
Yeah.
faster at the marathon, and then maybe it's actually the opposite. And it's interesting how, unless someone actually tells you or shows you or you
Right.
experience it yourself, then how would you know?
Yeah. That's totally true. Well, there is something about training your brain to deal with pain that will certainly pay off in a race. I mean, if you go, zone 2 in training the
Yeah.
whole time, you're gonna have a hell of a time of just laying it out on the marathon course, trying to do as absolutely best you can. I had a friend years ago that wanted to bust some time, and he was running with me, and he kept mentioning his heart rate, and he had to keep it. And I finally said, "Dude, throw it on the ground. If you want your PR, you gotta lose that. Forget about your heart rate. Go until when your heart stops, then you'll know that you went too hard." But yeah, I literally just learned that. I just did my first lactic threshold test,
Yeah.
and he told me to, on my treadmill, solo, so it wasn't with a mask and, like,
Yeah.
a full place. And he's like, told me to push it as hard as I could. And I said, but I'm telling me to do that is probably dangerous and not even, you know what I mean? And I was able to keep, so it for I'm basically a 58-year-old. I think my threshold should be, or my whatever it is, should be like 162. And I was
Mhm.
able to keep like a 180 something heart rate for 45 minutes. And
That is insane.
like, to
That is
literally the
insane.
point where I was like, God, I think my heart is hurting. And so, um, but anyway, when it was all done, I even explained to him, I'm like, I'm not sure that's really my threshold, because I was like, I shouldn't, like, a normal person would not have done that. But anyway, I was looking forward to training now, thinking, because he just sent me, I had to do an hour spin at like a easy zone 2. And I was like, oh my God, if I did, this will be a dream. Cause normally I'm
Mhm.
pushing things so hard that, well past what's probably good for me. So, yeah, you're never too late to learn anything new, that's for sure.
No, and I also find it interesting what you were saying, because I do agree with you that you need to train your brain or your head to get into that competitive state and just push yourself, especially in the marathon, like the last 6 miles. I think it's hard for everyone,
Yeah.
right? But I had Ingrid Christiansen on. I don't know if you remember
Yes.
that name, but
Yeah.
yeah, I had her on a couple of weeks ago, and what she said was that obviously there was a lot of intensity control, so a lot of low intensity, but she competed a lot.
Right.
So it was not about not running fast, or like it was all about running slow when she was supposed to run slow. But then when she competed, then she's now criticizing the people who today are running a half marathon, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but I'm just gonna do it at marathon effort." And it's just
Right.
like, why?
Yeah.
If you're competing, if you're on that line, you go all out. Like,
Yeah.
a competition is a competition, a race is a race. So I think that if you combine that, that will probably help you a bit more, because then you are able to do exactly what you're saying of training your brain, training that mental capacity.
Right.
But then on the easy runs, you're letting your body rest, recover, and build in a lot of ways, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
then
you
maybe
probably
that
find a
will
happy
help you.
medium. I mean, there is something to be said for rest and recovery, which is, I'm just learning that now. And and I've been going hard for I don't know how many years, and there is a bit of a burnout that you risk, and I think I was kind of going through it, like a year ago, and maybe still working my way out of it, where I was going so hard that you risk burning yourself out. So at some
Mhm.
point, for me, if I've even telling myself, if I want to keep running, at some point I'm going to have to let go of like those arbitrary time goals. And if I want to run longer in my life, I'm going to have to probably run slower at some point. Um, so yeah, there's got to be some balance in there for sure.
Yeah. Well, can I ask what your PR is in a marathon?
320
Yeah, that's pretty good.
at about 50 years old. So yeah, not entirely super slow. I mean,
No, it's good.
yeah, it's decent.
Yeah, very good.
What's your PR? I bet I
Two,
can only imagine how fast you are.
I ran 2:47 a week and a half ago.
Wow, is that your
So yeah,
PR?
yeah, that's
Oh,
my PR.
congratulations. How
Thanks.
many
So
minutes did
I
you beat
actually
it by?
5.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I have the same competition with myself. It's probably gonna be a bit harder, but you had that of not running or over 4 hours in the majors. Mine is I've still not done a marathon over 3 hours. So I'm just hoping to keep that
So you haven't
streak
you
of.
haven't gone over 3 yet.
Now
Oh my god.
my first one. I did one in training, and that was 2:56, and then I did 2:52 at my first official marathon, and
Okay.
then 2:53 in Boston, and then 2:47 now.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. So I'm aiming at a 2:39 marathon in December.
That's what you're going for.
Yeah,
239. Yeah, because you
yeah,
say you're 32?
yeah.
Yeah, because you haven't even come close to peaking. I mean, I feel like runners
I
can peak
think
at like 40 maybe.
yeah. Kipchoge is 40. He still did a
Yeah,
2:08 or
right?
2:09
Oh, wow,
in
that's
Sydney.
amazing. Yeah, I would never I
So
mean, I think I've looked back, like, if I had gotten into it, I still don't think I could have broken. I just don't think physiologically and athletically I could have ever broken 3 even because I started late. I'd like to say, "Oh, if I start earlier, I could have." I don't think I could have. Like,
no.
maybe could have come close. I kind of, looking back on it, wish I could have done 3 teens, that part of my head, like, God,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
319 sounded so much better than 320, but those days are definitely gone. Yeah. I think again, one day though, the graph will intersect where my age will reconnect with
Yeah.
the Boston qualifying time. And when I was doing the 50 states, like 2 or 3 years ago in Oregon, I showed up thinking I was going to run, maybe just bust under 4, and I ran like an accidental 323. Um,
Wow.
so nothing but feeling good and a whim. So I think if I actually got serious, I could probably qualify again, but I'm not totally sure.
I'm honestly super curious. This is obviously based on only the things that you told me just now of like now learning more about the intensity zones. If you were to combine all your experience but also add more of that,
Right.
how fast you could actually, like, if you gave yourself a couple of years to try to even PR,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if by doing that you could do a PR.
You mean right now at 58, you think?
Yes,
God, that's
yes.
crazy. I mean, who knows? But the other thing is that my diet has been absolutely, I mean, I'm like a cheeseburger and pizza guy, like known for it. And my wife has often said, like, when she sees me eating something like crap, it's like, imagine what you could have been doing all these years if you actually had even a reasonable diet. So
Hmm.
that's, yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe once Everest is done and all the big ones are done, I could get back to marathoning like seriously and see maybe what I could do. Yeah, with this whole new heart rate knowledge I just learned. Who knew?
Yeah. I'm really curious to see. I hope that you'll give it a shot because I think that could actually change a lot. I at least I've heard a lot of stories
So do
about
you
that.
train mostly in heart rate in zone 2? Is that is that what
Yeah,
are you
yes. So 1 and 2. Honestly,
Really?
when I did my first marathon in 2:52, I did not even average one threshold workout a week.
You're
And
kidding.
yeah, and like for this block before the marathon, I didn't hit zone 4.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think
the
I've
thing is that my
literally
body, my body's when I get to race day, my body is so ready to race because it hasn't been
Oh,
exhausted yet. So it's
right.
kind of like, okay, we know what to do, and I've given it enough stimuli to know that we're preparing for something, right?
Yeah.
And then yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think I'm
there are
really honestly
obviously
doing it totally wrong. I mean, I'm mentally, I'm right on, like trying to prepare, but physically, I think I'm definitely not doing it right.
it doesn't sound like you've been doing everything wrong. You've done a lot of things right,
Well,
but I do
thanks for
think that
saying
there
that,
could be
but
some. I do think that there could be some more potential there that you haven't really gotten out. So
interesting.
I would be very curious to see or
Yeah.
hear
Huh.
how that went if you actually if you were structured with that, because that is there are so many examples of that within like the best athletes in the world, but also people like us who are just doing this for fun, and they just change this and realize that,
Yeah.
and that can change a lot,
Yeah. Well, at
because you
240
will
something.
just have a bit more of a snap in your like in every stride, and I think
Yeah.
also the last 6 miles it will be hard, but you'll be able to push through and still get something back, if that makes
Yeah.
sense,
No, it
rather
makes
than
total
actually slowing down.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. You're probably right.
I usually I mean, I'm not no expert, but it works for me. But I usually look at it as a glass of water, and I always want my glass to be like a little bit more than half full,
Right.
because and that is my training. And then as soon as if I train too hard or also too much, obviously it just starts filling up and it gets too much in there. But if I'm on competition day, has have like a half full glass, then I have so much room to just fill that up,
Right.
and then maybe at the end of the race I'm full, but
Yeah. Oh, that's a
not
nice way to think
until then.
about it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm learning something today. I
Well,
thought I knew it
hopefully that.
all. Who knew?
Hopefully that's some useful information. Frank, I really really appreciate your time. I'm just I'm gonna sprint up to my fiance and tell her about the conversation I had with Frank, who did all these crazy things. And I'm obviously stoked for you in the Mount Everest. I hope that that goes well and
I
that the
appreciate it.
preparations will
Yeah, we'll
be
definitely
good. We
have to
didn't
stay
really
in
have time
touch.
to talk about. Yeah,
And if
definitely.
you come over
Didn't.
to the States, you can run the Marine Corps Marathon, and you and your fiance or
I,
maybe then wife can stay in my house.
that would be really good. We really need to go do some more marathons over there. We're over there like in Boston five times a year, and
Oh, yeah.
her uncle and aunt, they live in DC. So
Oh, no kidding. There you go.
yes, yeah. So
Awesome.
I'll definitely hit you up.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you for guessing the marathon podcast. Good luck with all your adventures going
I
forward, and
appreciate it. Thanks for
let's
having me.
let's have you back on at 200.
Awesome. Deal.
Thank you, Frank, for guesting the Marathon Podcast. And thank you for listening to the Marathon Podcast. That was all for today. I'll talk to you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wild Studio.